We are back on season 2, episode 2 of My Mayor with the current mayor, Ken Welch. Welcome, sir.
Good to be back, Joe.
Good to see you. So we got 5 fresh, fun questions for you to help the voters continue to get to know you.
Are they guaranteed fresh, though? That's the question.
Guaranteed. I can't guarantee they're fresh, no.
Okay.
I think that's trademarked.
Okay.
What's something you've become much better at in the last 5 years that would surprise your younger self?
It really wouldn't surprise my younger self, but, just the experience of the last 5 years as mayor, starting with COVID and going through 5 hurricanes, it's, really sharpened focus on what's important and, what's important for our city going forward in terms of resilience, just our whole approach to how we become a resilient community. It's more than just 3 days of food and water anymore, right? We've got to do a lot more in terms of infrastructure, in terms of what we do to make our communities more resilient, helping folks to rebuild better. And that really was a game changer, not only for me personally, but for our entire community. So just that focus on what life looks like for the next 50 years for the city of St. Pete and how we maintain, the great quality of life we have. And the storms really changed the focus on that.
Yeah. Sometimes I think of things as, if you're in a state of a deficit, you're sort of -1, just fighting to get back to zero, to stasis. And then when you're kind of at that stasis 0, you're looking to expand up to 1. I think that's in the startup world. Do you feel like most of your first term was sort of just because of the hurricanes and pandemics, that it was, you got pushed down and just had to fight your way back up to get the city back right again, and now you're kind of looking for the opportunity to go 0 to 1?
We were able to do multiple things, and that's why I always try to tell a story of how great our staff, our St. Pete team is, because not only did they deal with COVID and 5 hurricanes and the historic gas plant, but they did all the everyday stuff: the water, the sewer, the sanitation, the parks. They did all those things in addition to that. And, they were just burning the midnight oil, doing all those things. A lot of them, well over 100, had damaged or lost their own homes and were, still working to try to get the community back on their feet. So I wouldn't say we were doing storm prep and recovery exclusively by any means. We were doing both jobs. And I think that's really reflected well in the quality of employee that we have in the city of St. Pete. Folks ought to know that.
Yeah. Wonderful. What's a question you wish more people would ask before forming an opinion?
Consider the source. And that even more nowadays, I just was touring a facility and they had a little QR code at a station, and you pull up the QR code and the movie comes up and it looks like a Hollywood movie. I'm like, where'd you get these actors for? It was all AI. And so you can create any narrative you want to with the tools that are out there. So it's just more important than ever for folks to kind of do a little research, know the source of the information. It's not just scammers anymore. It's just a really tough world to navigate if you're not aware of, the source of information. And that's really a concern going forward. What's legitimate, authentic information versus something that was built either intentionally or mistakenly with bad information. So just consider the source, I'd say, be the recommendation.
Yeah, most definitely. Tell me about a time you've been completely or somewhat wrong about someone.
That was a tough one. I'll go back to what was a path of learning for me, and it goes all the way back to 2006, but to me, it's the most relevant one. Somehow I was on the county commission. I got assigned to the Homeless Leadership Network Committee. And I never really dealt with homelessness, but I ended up being chair of that committee. It was the first countywide plan to address homelessness. And just learning about the many paths to homelessness. It's just not, one way that a person becomes homeless. These folks most of them are employed. It could be a traffic accident away, a medical issue, a domestic violence issue. There are a lot of ways that folks end up homeless. So you just can't broad brush folks with, just being a bum or whatever. Um, and therefore the path out of that is going to be different for different people. Some just need a job. Some just need a place to get back on their feet for 30 days. Some do have mental health or substance abuse issues. They need wraparound services. So just understanding and getting to know homeless folks, we've, served meals at Pinellas Hope, work with homeless organizations around the county. And you just learn how many folks end up without a place to call home for a period of time for so many different reasons. And I'm really proud of the city of St. Pete and Pinellas County. We've got a continuum of care that really can help folks to get back on their feet. And they do that every day of the week. And just that learning, I'm glad to know that we have organizations out there that do that we support, and that folks that end up homelessness do have a good chance of getting help in the city of St. Pete and in Pinellas County.
Yeah, I'm always shocked when we do stories. The ALICE, I believe, is the acronym, where it's folks that are employed, but really, like you said, just one fender bender or one broken arm away from their housing actually being in jeopardy because they're so
absolutely
sort of hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck, and it's like 30% of people. It's a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
What's a lesson life taught you the hard way?
There have been many examples. I wouldn't call it hard. I'd call it just necessary. There are things you go through. And in my faith, you go through it. You don't get stuck in it. But there are tests and trials that you have to go through, and you don't understand why you're going through it at that time. But you can look back and see, okay, now I'm stronger. Now I've faced that obstacle. Now I've overcome that. So I think life has a lot of trials, and the key is to focus on moving through that and being able to learn from that experience.
All right, final question. When nobody's asking anything of you and curiosity takes over, what's the rabbit hole that you disappear into?
Okay. And I just talked about this a little bit, but it's not directly related. I think we're living in a time, it's like the Industrial Revolution or the computer revolution with AI. And the more I, get into that and, learn about agents and workflow and all those things you can actually do with that and become so much more productive. Now, again, you still have to check the sources because it's not 100% accurate. But it's that this is life changing. We're living in an era of life changing technology. And I think we all have to learn about at least what it can do for your everyday life. But even more than that, for students, for the next generation, make sure it empowers them, doesn't, replace them, but empowers them in their careers. So that's to me what I'm spending a lot of time on, just trying to understand what it's capable of and in small ways using it in my job.
What are some of your favorite use cases that you've found in your studies or your work?
It is embedded in everything now. So even if you're in Microsoft Word or even just a PDF reader, you can get an app for it called PDF Expert. It's embedded in that. So it's in the tools we use every day, whether you actively use it or not. But I like to use it just for research, throwing together summaries of long documents. But general research is just an outstanding tool. I used to be the kid with the big red World Book encyclopedias. So this to me is like, just a candy store.
Yeah. And, obviously anytime there's big movements and people don't have immediate command of it, there's a disconnect. They can be afraid of it. Obviously, there's also in parallel to that some energy around the data centers and the the facilities that underlie the technology. How do you approach making the community more comfortable with the various elements of AI, knowing A, that it's useful, B, that it's inevitable, and C, that all things have positives and negatives. How do you kind of feel that's
it's kind of like the Duke Energy discussion we're having. We have to get the facts. What are the goals of the community? Do we think AI is beneficial? Absolutely. So what are the real environmental concerns, energy use concerns, those kinds of things? And we've got to make a logical decision about, value versus cost on that. Everything I hear, from folks that are opposed to it, including the legislature, is that, just outrageous consumption of energy and water and those kinds of things. And even like small nuclear reactors to run them, which seems crazy to me, but we run submarines on them all the time. So, and ships. So we just got to have that conversation, work through it. I think we all believe in the benefits of the technology. Now we have to get our arms around what does it cost actually to run these data centers and where should they be?
And just reflects back how amazing the human brain is, that it takes a nuclear reactor to do what our little brains can do with just a cheeseburger power.
There you go.
Wonderful. Oh, very much appreciate you taking time. I know you're very busy, and appreciate
Always
you stopping by and sharing. And
all right.
Good luck. Thank you.